This is the Invite Health Podcast, and I am Amanda Williams. On today's episode, I will be discussing digestive health and the importance of making sure that we are maintaining a healthy intestinal environment. And this comes from multiple different mechanisms. We can look at dietary intake. Obviously, we know that the foods do matter, and you are what you eat. We can look at things like probiotics, the healthy microbiome certainly can help to enhance the overall digestive tract as well as our immune system. And I'm going to focus in on what you can be doing during this time to make sure that you are maintaining the integrity of the intestinal lining as well as the upper part of the digestive tract as well. Now, before I get too far into it, just want to give you a reminder to subscribe to the Invite Health Podcast today. You can leave us a review. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. Remember that all the information on today's episode will be linked in the episode description, and you can visit invitehealth.com/podcast for more information. So let's talk about digestive health. I want to talk about a couple of different studies that have come out, and they kind of tie into what I'm discussing today. One came out of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and they were talking about the gut-brain connection. Once again, we certainly know an unhealthy gut can lead to an unhealthy brain in the sense of mood disorders, anxiety, depression, lack of, focus, cognitive decline in general. And at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, they were talking about the sensation of sweetness starts on the tongue, but sugar molecules also trip sensors in the gut that directly signal the brain. And they said this could explain why certain things like artificial sweeteners fail to satisfy the insatiable craving for sugar. They said a little sugar can make us crave just about anything, from cookies to condiments to coffee smothered in, whipped cream and sweet creams that people are adding in. But they said it's the sweetness that they really started to analyze, and looking at that interaction between the gut and the brain and that direct connection. We certainly know a lot more extensive research has really gone into this subject in probably the last decade. And I think that that's an important thing to notate when you look at how much diet impacts overall health and how often we are to disregard diet and disregard the impact that foods are having on our health. So in the Journal of Nature, this was just published, the Journal of Nature, they were talking about the intestines and the connections within the intestines based off of those microbiomes, so based off of those bacteria, and how that is sending different signals directly to the brain. So this gut to brain pathway to be extremely problematic when we're dealing with sugar molecules. And they said scientists already knew that sugar exerted this unique control over the brain. They said there was a 2008 study that showed that mice without the ability to taste sweetness can still prefer sugar. Now, isn't that interesting? So they couldn't taste it, but they still preferred it. So that was telling you something about a signaling pathway, this sugar sensing pathway. So what does it come down to? It comes down to the gut, which I just thought was interesting because there's been so much research drawing that connection. So I'm always happy to see new studies that come out that link that. So studies that have linked excess sugar consumption to so many different health problems, including obesity, including type 2 diabetes, and being able to look further just beyond, okay, this person has a craving for, cookies or brownies or pasta or bread or whatnot, but to actually realize that there is this real neuronal connection, and it is coming from that signaling pathway from the intestine. So this sugar circuit basically that has occurred in the body. So really some impressive research there out of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'll tell you more about digestive health.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. What people oftentimes don't recognize is when we're talking about inflammation going on within the intestinal environment, people expect it to be inflammation like you're going to actually see this. You're going to somehow recognize, you see, maybe you're extremely bloated. I mean, that's one indication, but generally speaking, people have no idea if they're walking around in a state of high inflammatory response. Because it's different than an acute inflammatory reaction in which you get, redness, you get increased swelling in the area, you get, oftentimes it's hot or warm to the touch. That's acute inflammatory response. Chronic inflammation, much, much different. And when you look at these different studies that have come out, so the one study drawing the connection between sugar, sweetness, gut, brain, and how those microbes are playing a role into it. Now looking at how the communication between the microbial community and the host immune system, how that's actually working, I think is just once again another way to really explain how it is that we as humans are so much impacted by our environment as well as by our foods. And indeed, it is the bile acids that are produced, the bacteria that are existing within the intestines, and then that triggering response in terms of a healthy immune response. And so when we're lacking in these things, then we start to see the negative implications of this. So why digestive enzymes are so critical as we get older. And part of that reason is because our natural production of enzymes begins to go down as we get older, as with many things. Our normal stores of antioxidants diminish as we age. We certainly know things like coenzyme Q10 is not produced at the same amounts as we get older as when we were younger. And then we look at the digestive aspects. Remember, the digestive health is directly tied into your immune response. It's directly tied into cognitive function. So we know this to be the case. So it would make sense that you would want to be taking care of your digestive health. So we think about digestive enzymes, and the body is equipped with enzymes to aid in the breakdown of foods. Now remember, the foods that you are supposed to be introducing are supposed to be healthy foods, not, these high processed foods, high sugary foods. That's not what we're after. We want to be adhering to a Mediterranean diet. But the key digestive enzymes to aid in that digestive breakdown of those foods include things like pepsin, betaine. Then you look at all the pancreatic digestive enzymes such as amylase, lipase, protease. All of these help the body when it comes to the breakdown of actual food. So if we're lacking in them, then it would be advantageous to put them back in, which is why I want to talk to you about our Digestive Hx formulation. Digestive Hx is a comprehensive blend of key and essential digestive enzymes. So as we get older and we're not producing those enzymes at that same rate, we want to make sure that we are not doing a taxing job every time we eat on our digestive tract itself. So I'm going to talk to you in some detail about this particular product, the Digestive Hx. I'm also going to talk about our Digestive Plus. The two oftentimes are partnered up together. They're working very, very differently, and I will explain those differences. But the Digestive Hx is a great formulation. I've had so many people that do really well on this who have had maybe years-long history of GI issues, maybe chronic irritable bowel issues, maybe having problems with gas and bloating and all types of things that can come up. But the Digestive Hx is a really nice formulation to incorporate into your routine. I'll go into details on that, but we need to take a quick break, so we will be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. We are talking about digestive health today, why that's important, especially during these times when we want to make sure that we are maintaining a healthy intestinal system as well as our immune system. So we're talking about the Digestive Hx formulation. Now, the way I usually will advise people to utilize this is taking one capsule ideally 15 minutes prior to a meal, especially with your heaviest meal of the day. So maybe you have a real light breakfast, then maybe you don't need the Digestive Hx. However, we know that as we get older, our enzymes are not produced at that same capacity as when we were younger. So in this formulation, this has a really great blend of lipase, protease, and amylase. Now remember, lipases help in breaking down the fats, so lipids, hence lipase, break down the fats from your food. Proteases break down proteins from your food, and then amylases break down the carbohydrates or the starches from your food. This also contains betaine hydrochloride. Now, the hydrochloride, that is something that's normally occurring in the stomach. You have hydrochloric acid, and that's the initial response that your food is introduced to when it hits the stomach. So you have hydrochloric acid. Now remember, digestion itself starts with the sense of smelling. So as soon as you smell food, then what happens is you start to get this instantaneous release of enzymes in the saliva. So you get a release of amylase, you get a release of the protease. These start to come out in the saliva, so that initial breakdown of food actually begins in the mouth through that act of chewing. But it all is stemmed from smelling. And then from there, we go into the stomach where we have that introduction of the hydrochloric acid and pepsin. Now, pepsin is a very strong acid as well, and it also aids in the breakdown of things such as protein. So our Digestive Hx contains both of these. It has pepsin. It also has the betaine hydrochloride. We also have in this formulation lactase. So for those who maybe have a greater sensitivity to certain dairy products that have higher lactose amounts, or if someone has already been informed by their physician, maybe through a series of food sensitivity testing, that you have lactose intolerance, then it's always advantageous to take a digestive enzyme that contains lactase. Because even if you're eating something that is technically supposed to be lactose free, you could still have residual exposure. So having an enzyme that can target that lactose is really quite beneficial. So having the lactase in the Digestive Hx formulation is just an added bonus. We also have in this 2 different nutrients that are actually plant-derived. One is coming from papaya, the other one is coming from pineapple. So we think about different fruits. So we get bromelain coming from the pineapple, and then we get papain that comes from papaya. Both of those are lovely when it comes to targeting protein digestion. So if you have a meal that is higher in protein content, maybe more meats, things along that line, having the added benefit of both the papain and the bromelain will help ease the body's digestive work by helping to break those proteins down. Now, this also has something really quite unique in it, which is known as alpha-galactosidase. Alpha-galactosidase is an enzyme that helps and aids in the breakdown of things such as broccoli, cabbage, beans, for example, even onions and peppers. Many people, as they get older, they find that they don't do as well, especially with raw vegetables that they once used to. So maybe in the past you could have, a salad that was loaded down with, raw onion and peppers, even, having raw broccoli on there. But maybe now when you have that, it just doesn't sit so well with you. Well, the reason why is because as humans, we don't have something known as cellulase. Cellulase helps to break down cellulose. So if we are lacking in that because we just don't make it, then it makes sense that as we get older, the breakdown of those foods becomes harder because now we're lacking in other enzymes, and the digestive tract itself begins to slow. So the actual mechanical breakdown of foods, that process starts to slow down as we get older. So having the alpha-galactosidase enzyme put into this particular formulation helps the body with the breakdown of those different foods, those vegetables that sometimes people are not responding to good, perhaps beans, for example. So this is a really comprehensive blend. So you're getting, pancreatine, you're getting the protease, you're getting amylase, you're getting the betaine hydrochloride, you get the papain in this, all of these different nutrients together to help with that natural breakdown of the foods. Now, ideally, you're already adhering to a Mediterranean diet, which makes everything in terms of the digestive process that much easier. However, even with that being said, we still know that just through the aging process alone, we start to lose that ability to produce adequate amounts of enzyme. So having this incorporated into your routine certainly can be a beneficial thing. Now, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I will tell you some more about digestive health. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. I said I also wanted to talk about our Digestive Plus formulation. Now, the Digestive Plus is really quite interesting in the sense that Digestive Plus contains zinc bound to carnosine along with glutamine. So we think about glutamine being a very powerful amino acid that does so much in terms of supporting the integrity of your intestinal lining. So just throwing glutamine by itself would be beneficial. But the fact that we combine that with zinc carnosine And it's not zinc by itself and it's not carnosine by itself. They're molecularly bound together, and that's where you're actually yielding that true benefit. So it's the zinc bound to the carnosine. And this is really great for people who have a long history of GI issues. So whether that's, you've had chronic heartburn, you've had acid reflux, you've had irritable bowel, and we know that the lining of both the upper and lower GI have been affected by that, then we would want to definitely be looking at the Digestive Plus. That is absolutely one of our go-to formulations, especially if someone has a history of a lot of GI problems. And a lot of people who have a history of GI problems, it oftentimes comes down to having infections with certain bacteria, and the number one bacteria would be H. pylori, which is Helicobacter pylori. H. pylori is very prevalent, and it can be the main reason as to why people experience significant GI issues, including peptic ulcers, duodenal ulcers, as well as stomach cancer. So the number one reason as to why people develop stomach cancer comes down to this long-standing chronic infection of H. pylori. We know that this can be very damaging. What the H. pylori actually is doing is it releases different acids that can basically start to eat away the lining of your stomach. So it's very, very problematic, and which is why I always encourage anyone who has a long-standing history of GI issues. Maybe you have, frequent belching, maybe you have bloating, gas, things along that line. Definitely have an H. pylori test done. They can assess this in a couple of different ways. They can do a blood test. They can also do a breath test where you actually breathe into a bag and it's looking for levels of that particular acid that the H. pylori bacteria itself produces. So this is a very targeted nutrient that we offer, the Digestive Plus, with that combination of the PepZing is what it's called. That is a registered trademark form that has actually been used in clinical trials for people who have peptic ulcer disease, as well as people who have significant damage to the lining of the stomach brought on because of H. pylori. It's really quite interesting. Years ago, they used to look at stomach ulcers and correlate them solely to stress. And say, the higher stress someone had, the greater likelihood of the development of ulcers. Now, over time, they've recognized that it's actually H. pylori that's eroding that mucosal barrier, and it leaves the delicate tissues within the stomach very exposed to a lot of the harsh acids. And then, oftentimes people have heard of the word gastritis or inflammation that's occurring within the stomach lining. If we do not target that inflammation, then we have this continual loss of function within the stomach itself. So zinc carnosine has this ability to go through, because remember what zinc is doing. Zinc is one of your most important minerals in the body, and it plays a critical role in wound healing. So when we think about any type of damage done to mucosal linings, to the skin itself, zinc plays a critical role in the body's ability to heal itself. So we know something about zinc. We know that it's estimated that anywhere from 50 to 75% of the U.S. population is actually low in zinc. And then we look at the rate of infection of H. pylori, and you can start to correlate that. And I always just go back to a really key point. I always say if you can look through your Sunday flyers and look at places like CVS or Walgreens, they generally have 2 solid pages that are dedicated to GI, meaning this is for heartburn, this is for acid reflux, this is to aid in digestion. I mean, they have so many different formulations, and you have to think about that. Why is that? Because so many people need these. But the problem with those that you get from your CVS and your Walgreens is they're usually harsh. They're oftentimes pharmaceutical agents that have been now made available in the sense of over the counter. So when we think about things like Prilosec and Pepsids, all of those, we know that long-term use of those really can create their own slew of problems. When we think about kidney health, when we think about brain health, when we think about bone health, long-term use of proton pump inhibitors, not really a good idea. Ideally, those should be used only in an acute situation, meaning you should only be on a medication like that for about 2 weeks at most. And many people who are on those medications have been on them for 10, 15, 20 years. That is not solving the problem. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, but we do need to take a quick break, so we will be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. Before the break, I was talking about proton pump inhibitors and different things that you can oftentimes find over the counter to target issues with acid reflux and heartburn. The problem with those medications is that the longer you're on them, the greater likelihood that you can develop more significant side effects, including bone loss, including issues with declining kidney function. They've been able to correlate the long-term use of proton pump inhibitors even in cardiovascular disease. So not something that I would advise someone being on long-term, because you're not treating the actual issue. You're just kind of masking it. What we do know is oftentimes the reason why people are experiencing GI issues is because of H. pylori infection. And many people go undiagnosed. They never even look for H. pylori. So first and foremost, if you have a history of upper GI issues, definitely request an H. pylori test. Secondly, think about what happens just during the aging process. We know we are not making adequate enzymes. So this is why adding in that Digestive Hx, taking one before your meals, can be very beneficial. We also know that the foods matter. And when people are experiencing wear and tear within their GI tract, oftentimes they don't pay attention to the foods. Maybe you go in and you talk to your doctor and they say, oh, just try and watch, things that may trigger you, like high citrus and, things like tomato. But once again, that's not really solving it, because if you're just trying to avoid things with tomato and citrus, but you're still eating horrible foods, how are you making anything better? You're still adding to that chronic inflammation and the wearing away of the lining of the stomach and the intestines. We don't want that to happen. So go back to the Digestive Plus now and think about damage that's already occurred within the upper GI. So we're talking the esophagus and the stomach. What can we do? Well, we look at all of the clinical trials with zinc carnosine. So remember, that's elemental zinc bound to carnosine. Carnosine is an amino acid. Now, human studies have shown that zinc carnosine is effective at reducing the symptoms associated with ulcers while promoting the healing of those damaged areas. And they have looked specifically at people who have diagnosis of gastric ulcers. And after 8 weeks of taking zinc carnosine, they found a 64% reduction in heartburn. They found a 77% reduction in abdominal distension, so when you feel bloated. They found a 67% reduction when it comes to nausea, and 80% reduction in belching. as well as a 70% reduction in stomach tenderness. Now, they also reported from this that for many of these folks who had these ulcers, they experienced extreme amounts of pain at night. And they found a complete disappearance of nighttime pain in 91% of the participants. Now, when they went back in after 8 weeks and they re-scoped these people, so doing an endoscopy, they found healing in 65%. 65%. That is absolutely astronomical. And we're not talking about using a pharmacological agent. We are talking about using two things that the body relies on, an amino acid and a very critical mineral. And this was published in the Therapeutic Clinical Effects Journal. And this was the findings of their phase 3 clinical study. So really some interesting studies done with that combination of zinc bound to carnosine. But that's just amazing. 65% when they did the re-scoping that they were finding healing occurring. Really just, I'm always amazed by this. And then the other thing that always amazes me is how often they overlook the connection between H. pylori and Parkinson's disease. Remember when we talk about gut-brain connections? There is a very strong correlation between undiagnosed and untreated H. pylori and Parkinson's disease, which is why I always tell people, do not mess around. If you start to experience GI issues, don't just kind of poo-poo them away and say, I'll try and eat better tomorrow. Maybe I won't have these problems. Have that test done, because if you have H. pylori, you need to be treated for that. And then you need to go back in and you need to re-scope. And you need to be taking zinc carnosine to try and promote that healing. All of this is so incredibly important. Now, they've been able to compare giving people indomethacin, which is a very strong NSAID, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, versus zinc carnosine. And what they were really looking for was the gut permeability. And they said stresses such as prolonged strenuous activity and long-term exposure to NSAIDs can damage the gut barrier. And they said they wanted to look and see if zinc carnosine can help to protect or increase the gut permeability caused by NSAIDs. So the NSAID that they used in this study was indomethacin. And they found that the indomethacin really worsened gut permeability. Then they had the same group of people who had damage done to their intestinal lining because of the NSAIDs. Then they gave them zinc carnosine. And they were finding in this that after starting the zinc carnosine, they started to see this improvement in terms of the gut permeability, being able to basically go through and kind of clean up the damaging effects of what that NSAID did, that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. So this is something that shouldn't be overlooked, that's for sure. Now, we can look at H. pylori and the specifics with H. pylori. There's been so much research done in the last decade on H. pylori, and now understanding that it is H. pylori that is this main causative agent or pathogen to the development of ulcers, to the development of stomach cancer, they've really focused a lot of attention on this. And at first they were like, well, maybe we can just give people these proton pump inhibitors. But they were realizing this actually wasn't doing anything to heal. This is why so much research has gone in to looking at that zinc and carnosine in terms of supporting the stomach wall, in terms of easing up inflammation. Even in the setting of people who had H. pylori, they were seeing that just the zinc carnosine alone was able to lower the infectiveness of that H. pylori, basically creating an environment where that H. pylori was having a very difficult time releasing its acid that was doing all of the damage. So if we're helping to enhance the gut permeability and we're healing along the way, that's a pretty darn impressive thing. So we have our Digestive Plus formulation that contains that zinc bound to carnosine, plus it has that power of glutamine. Glutamine, we know, we've seen clinical research with leaky gut, as they call it, but when we are once again losing that gut permeability, and the reason why that matters is if we don't have proper gut permeability, if we're losing the integrity of our intestinal lining, then we are going to have a very difficult time when it comes to nutrient absorption. So once again, we can start to draw those connections and see people who have chronic histories of GI problems and then start to look at the nutrients that they are actually deficient in because they can't absorb them because there's been so much damage done to the actual lining of the stomach as well as to the intestine. So it's not something that you want to play around with. And our gut matters. Our gut matters immensely. When you think about 70 to 80% of the immune system being located in the intestines. If you have chronic inflammation because of irritable bowel and you're not making adjustments in terms of your diet, if you're not making adjustments in terms of taking digestive enzymes and taking something such as the Digestive Plus to promote that healing, then what are you doing to your immune system? So this is why I always like to be able to connect those dots for you. We know there is a link between neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson and H. pylori. So we have that gut-brain connection. We know that we have that direct correlation between chronic inflammation and lowered immune defenses. And we also know that we lower our immune defenses when we are not absorbing proper nutrients from our diet. If you are not getting adequate magnesium, zinc, selenium, iron from your diet because you have really poor gut permeability, then you're lowering your innate and your adaptive immune systems because your innate and adaptive immune systems are reliant on those essential minerals along with vitamins. So if you're following a standard American diet, we already know that your vitamin intake is not going to be too hot. If you're not taking in fruits and vegetables on a regular daily basis, and it's not a difficult feat to do, we're talking 2 cups of fruits and 3 cups of vegetables, but you try and present that to many Americans and they want no part of that. That's just what we haven't been marketed that way. They've marketed that we don't have time to eat healthy, or they try and present things as healthy, but they really aren't. They're still highly processed and have a ton of chemicals in them, artificial colors and artificial preservatives. So you have to be wise about the foods that you are eating because at the end of the day, you truly are what you eat. And your digestive system is so incredibly impacted by this, which is why I want to talk about digestive health with you today, get into some details about why enzymes matter, why minerals matter, and of course, why your foods matter. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Make sure you subscribe. You can leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.